The June 23rd Bridge Authority meeting continued to talk about safety concerns and the responsibility for monitoring the current bridge, which lies with the Port of Hood River. Discussions about the gridlock situation on June 11th due to the Rowena 2025 fire also came under discussion.
I want to reiterate, why are we doing the bridge monitoring on the old bridge for our benefit? It's really kind of two areas. One is we're probably going to do a test pile program. As we're driving piles, we want to make sure we're not hurting the adjacent current bridge pier because of foundations issues over there and liquefaction and so on. And the other thing for monitoring weather, we want to capture the weather over a couple of year period to see wind rates and so on by month. As we build the new bridge, that becomes pretty important. If you think about lifting something off a barge and putting it up into place, that thing can like a sail. So if it's high winds, you can't do it. So we're trying to come up with some ideas of how much high wind do you typically have? How many days do you typically have? How many days in a row? That's going to impact our construction schedule down the road. So we're capturing those kinds of information.
The commissioners also talked about social media comments around bridge safety and its congestion during the fire. Public concern about why the port is not monitoring the current bridge for safety also came up.
They were criticizing
the port and the bridge authority for not doing something more proactive on the bridge. I think the impression, as I kind of read through the narrative, was that the bridge is in awful shape and it's in risk of imminent collapse. I think there were some sound voices with some good engineering principles and a little more measured approach that kind of subdued that a little bit.
The most common discussion I got involved in was the concept of where I would explain to people the difference between static and dynamic load and explain to them, hey, when you're stopped on the bridge, you're actually safer than when you're moving on the bridge.
Yep.
And people just refuse to accept that.
And that did come out through some of the discussion. So
go ahead.
Yeah, I was following some of those conversations, and I think my takeaway was, something maybe we could do proactively, possibly, is how do we provide the bridge monitoring data to the public in a way that they could be understood? Obviously, giving them a stream of data isn't going to be super helpful, but is there something we could do to synthesize or break down that data so people feel like they're being informed and understanding the situation a little better?
But so the monitoring that I understand we're talking about isn't monitoring of stresses and strains on the bridge, it's monitoring of position.
Right.
And so strictly position. And so that will tell us external forces as well as thermal expansion, how those affect the current structure. But it's not going to tell us if the structure is approaching a failure point or something like that. That would be completely up to the port to do if they wanted to.
Correct.
exactly.
100%.
Okay.
Exactly.
Along with that, I was surprised the public hadn't asked a question. How will the new bridge help the situation that we just went through? With a new bridge, the way I see it, it gives the community much more flexibility of dealing with what we just went through. As an example, the bridge right now, the new bridge is a 2-lane bridge. But we could configure that in emergency condition as a 3-lane bridge pretty quickly, because there's enough room to squeeze 3 lanes on that bridge in an emergency. And there is actually a 4th lane on the other side of the buffer, under the barrier, for emergency if we had to have emergency vehicles go over.
I don't think that was the issue. As I understand it, and this is why I asked for this after incident review, as I understand the problem was the intersection at the far side. Mm-hmm. So replacing that with the roundabout traffic circle,
yes,
roundabout. Replacing with the roundabout is putting that into the calculation to show that can handle higher volume for emergency situations like
as with the new bridge. Here's the options that that the community will have that you don't have now.
Yeah.
The increased volume going through the roundabout, the ability in an emergency situation to reconfigure the bridge. If there's an accident on the bridge, we can now create a third lane to get traffic, keep traffic moving. There's an emergency lane if we have to take away from bicycles and pedestrians on the other side. It gives the operation so much more flexibility than what the community has today. Thus, another reason for expediting getting the new bridge built.
I think one of the issues that maybe the group also missed that was very much addressed is the weight restrictions that were not followed during the emergency as well, and the non-monitoring of the weighted and the very large vehicles that were going across. So I think for the public, we are aware of the group of very strong community members who we want to be involved, because this is a community bridge and we speak for you. And so the more comments and the more community advocacy or reaching out to the current authority is wanted, to be clear. Something that did lack in the emergency situation was the larger weighted vehicles. And so that is obviously not something that we as an authority can control. That's a Port of Hood River controlled aspect. And so that was also something that was brought up. But I guess, Mr. Fox, can you speak as a current Port of Hood River commissioner, can you speak to the weight restrictions and if the port has any plans on how to not have that happen in the future?
Right or wrong, good or bad, right now the port uses an honor system for trucks going across the bridge. We don't have police on either end of the bridge looking at trucks coming across the bridge. It's all signed as far as, hey, here's the weight restriction on bridge. But right now, there's no way to catch them. It's a totally honor system. I think one of the lessons learned that future boards can think about is that when we have an emergency situation like we just did, it may make sense for port employees somehow to get to the other side of the bridge, likewise on the Oregon side, and try and flag these trucks to get them out of the lane before they start across the bridge.
So what I was told is that in fact, the port employees cannot stop trucks. They don't have guns, they don't have big vehicles, they can't stop trucks. But ODOT was actually in place doing that, but a few slipped through. So when people say that there was no monitoring of it, that's not quite true. ODOT apparently was in place attempting to control the flow of large trucks, attempting to prevent large trucks from getting on the bridge, but some got through. So we don't know the exact form of the monitoring.
So ODOT does the Oregon side, WashDOT.
This is information I have.
Okay.
I also know that I read the emergency plan as it existed in 2008. I read, and that had police officers stationed at the various intersections.
Okay.
But I don't know that happened. So until we find out the specifics on whether that happened, we don't know what happened. That's why we should have a review done. And the other thing is people ask the questions like, why didn't ODOT stop the traffic at Troutdale from coming to Hood River, given that Hood River had reached gridlock and therefore emergency movement of emergency equipment in Hood River was stopped. I watched the West Side fire truck. They could not get through the traffic to get to the fire. So I spoke to the ODOT regional manager about that, and he said that, in fact, they did have extensive discussions about that and apparently decided not to. And I don't know what the specifics of the instruction were, but that's why we need a full report before we make conclusions.
I think one of the things we have to be careful of here in this authority, we have no control or responsibility for traffic going across the current bridge. We're dealing with building a new bridge. All of these comments related here really belong with the port.
They belong with the port. They also belong with the county for emergency management, with the city for police response and fire response. So many of us have other roles where we have to track this.
Yep.
Comments about safety with the current bridge can be directed to the Port of Hood River. Their next meeting is July 15th. Or you can ask about the incident review covering the gridlock during the Rowena 2025 June 11th incident to the county commissioners. Their next meeting is July 21st.